Thank you, Dr. Duque, and all of you for coming despite the rain. So I will present the results of the study that we conducted last year. Okay, so this person is what William Thomson, or Lord Kelvin. He was a physicist, a mathematician, and engineer who made great contributions to physics, and one of his important contributions was the development of absolute temperature scale, known as Kelvin scale, in his honor. So this is one of his famous quotes, and he said that if you want to measure what you are speaking about and express that in numbers, you know something about it. But if you can't measure something and you can't express it in numbers, your knowledge is meager and of an unsatisfactory kind. So you can improve it. So this is what surveillance is all about. Surveillance is measuring something and expressing it in numbers. Okay. So when we talk about antimicrobial stewardship program, surveillance is a very important core component because it enables us to assess the effects of our intervention. And with this data, we will be able to improve our decision making in terms of policies and other guidelines that we're going to make. So antimicrobial point prevalence survey is a well-established surveillance method for monitoring antimicrobial prescribing in hospitals. Not only that, it is also a tool used for audit and feedback. What can PPS do? It can provide information about the quality of prescribing and resistance rates. It can provide data to drive quality improvement at the hospital and even at the national level. It can be used for the development of metrics or indicators. It can be used for performance management. And it can provide local healthcare teams the opportunity to conduct research. So, after more than a year of planning, we finally conducted the first ever antimicrobial point prevalence survey last year. We invited 16 government and tertiary private hospitals from Luzon and Visayas. So there was a question why we did not include Mindanao, because at that time there was martial law in Mindanao and there was moratorium. So we just included Luzon and Visayas, but we rest assured that we will include Mindanao this time. So these 16 hospitals were chosen purposely because they are either part of the antimicrobial central site of the ARSP, or they have an antimicrobial stewardship program in place, or they have ID, adult ID, or pediatric ID, or both, that we know. So this is a collaborative project of PSMIT, PSMIT, PITSP, that is being coordinated by RITM and supported by the Pharmaceutical Division of the Department of Health. And we followed the protocol that was developed by the global PPS. So out of the 16 hospitals, 11 were hospitals in Luzon, and 9 were from the National Capital Region, 5 from the Visayas region, mainly Region 6 and Region 7. Okay. So we used and adopted the standardized and validated protocol that was developed by the global PPS based in Antwerp. This is a one-day cross-sectional point prevalence survey during which all wards admitting inpatients were audited once And this study took effect between September to November 2017. The detailed data were collected by nurses, doctors, and pharmacists in that particular hospital, and for each patient receiving at least one antimicrobial. So this is a sample of the ward form, which will later form the denominator in getting the prevalence data. This is an example of the patient form, which were used for each patient. So from the paper form, all data were entered into the database and safeguarded at the University of Antwerp. And the data were anonymous. The drugs were classified according to the standardized WHO antimicrobial therapeutic chemical classification system, and we obtained ethics approval from RITM, and other hospitals also did the same depending on the requirements of their hospital. Okay, so these are the results. So there were a total of 5,933 antimicrobial prescriptions, of which 90% were due to antibacterials for systemic use. And these are the denominators that we used in the subsequent slides. So the overall antimicrobial use prevalence rates in adults was 57.2%, or approximately 1 per every 2 patients. In children and neonates combined, the overall prevalence rate was 53.3%. But if we disaggregate children and neonates, it's higher in children at 61.2% and 31.8% among neonates. So this is the data from the 16 hospitals, and as you can see, there are variations as to the prevalence rates for each hospital, ranging from about 34% to the highest of 92%. Actually, this is an outlier. So what is good in this participation to the global PPS is that we are able to compare our data with the other regions. So this is the Philippines at 57.2%. We're higher compared to the East and Southeast Asia, for which we belong, and we're second to Africa, which has overall prevalence rate of 59.8%. So majority of the countries or continents are in the 20s or 30s. In children, the overall prevalence rate, as I mentioned, for the Philippines was 53.3%. So a little bit higher than East and Southeast Asia, which is 52.2%. And again, we're second to Africa, and Africa has a prevalence rate of 62%. Okay. So the next slides will show to us the types of antibiotics prescribed among adults and children. Okay. So these are the top antibiotics among adults. And cefuroxime is the most commonly prescribed antibiotic at 70.1%, followed by piperacillin tazobactam at 10.5%, and ceftriaxone at 10.3%. In children and neonates, the most commonly prescribed antibiotic is cefuroxime, followed by amikacin, and then ceftriaxone. But among neonates, the most commonly prescribed antibiotics are amikacin at 30.6% and ampicillin at 28.5%. Okay. So we also look at the 10 prescribed antibiotics for therapeutic use in adults. So there was the question in the inpatient form is about whether this antibiotic was given as a prophylactic or for treatment. So these are therapeutic use. And we segregated the patients as those having community-acquired infections and those having hospital-acquired infection. Among patients with community-acquired infections, the most commonly prescribed antibiotic was ceftriaxone at 15%, followed by piperacillin, tazobactam, and ciprofloxacin at 13%, and azithromycin at 12.8%. For hospital-acquired infections, the most commonly prescribed antibiotic was piperacillin, tazobactam at 21%, followed by meropenem at 18%, and also ciprofloxacin was at 21%. In children, for community-acquired infections, it's ceftriaxone at 16.2%, amikacin at 13.2%, and ceftriaxone at 14%. For hospital-acquired infections in children, it's amikacin at 16%, meropenem at 16%, and ceftazidime at 12.8%. Among neonates, the most common antibiotic prescribed for community-acquired infections are ampicillin, 29%, amikacin, 24%, and cefotaxime, 14%. For hospital-acquired infections, amikacin, 35%, ampicillin, 20%, and meropenem, 18.8%. Okay. So we also look at whether, and we compare this data of whether it is empiric or targeted with our East and Southeast Asian neighbors. As you can see, the data is more or less similar, but most of the antibiotics were really prescribed empirically. Only about 18% of antibiotics were considered prescribed as targeted antibiotics. Targeted meaning we base the antibiotic prescription in the susceptibility data that we have. So for hospital-acquired infection, still it is more of empiric therapy, but here targeted therapy for hospital-acquired infection is a little bit higher compared to the targeted therapy with community-acquired infections. Okay. So the next slide are the top 5 recorded diagnoses for which therapeutic antimicrobials have been prescribed among adults. So the most common diagnosis for which antibiotic was prescribed was pneumonia, both community-acquired and hospital-acquired, skin and soft tissue, gastrointestinal infections, tuberculosis, and intra-abdominal infections. So it's 33.9% rate for community-acquired pneumonias and 60.1% for hospital-acquired pneumonias. So in children, the top 5 recorded diagnoses for therapeutic antimicrobials are also pneumonia, 51.9% for community-acquired infections, and 41% for hospital-acquired pneumonias. So this slide will show to us the prevalence rate of community-acquired infections in the 16 hospitals in community-acquired infections is 23.7%, and children it's 54.2%, and in infants it's 21.4%. The prevalence, on the other hand, of healthcare-associated infections are 7.2% in adults, 7.3% in neonates, in children, and 10.8% among neonates. So we look at the top antibiotics that are being prescribed for pneumonias, because that is the most common infection where antibiotics are prescribed. So for community-acquired pneumonias, among children and neonates, it's cefuroxime, 16.1%, amikacin, 14%, and ampicillin, 13.9%. For hospital-acquired pneumonias, it's amikacin, 14.8%. Meropenem is the most commonly prescribed antibiotics at 18.5%, followed by ceftazidime at 16.7%. So among adults, the most common antibiotics prescribed for community-acquired pneumonia was azithromycin, 26.6%, piperacillin tazobactam, and ceftriaxone at 15%. For hospital-acquired infections, it's piperacillin tazobactam again at 26.7%, meropenem at 19.7%, and levofloxacin at 7.3%. So we move on to surgical prophylaxis in adults and children. The duration of antibiotic surgical prophylaxis overall in the 16 hospitals, that is more than 1 day, is 80%. And if you look at the individual hospitals, they use antibiotics as prophylaxis still for more than 1 day. So very few hospitals have usage of prophylaxis as recommended for 1 dose is very limited. So these are the antibiotics that are being prescribed for surgical prophylaxis, and the most common antibiotic is cefuroxime at 31%, and you will also note that there are wide variations as to the choice of antibiotics for surgical prophylaxis. And cephalosporin is only 10.4%. And in fact, cefazolin is the most commonly recommended antibiotic for surgical prophylaxis. Okay. So the next slides are what we call quality indicators. These quality indicators reflects the inappropriateness of antibiotic use, and there are several indicators for this. One is recency notes, guideline compliance, and stop and review date documentation. Recency notes are important because documentation of the reason for which that antibiotic is given conveys to the healthcare workers that are involved in the care of this patient what these antibiotics are for. So you will, the top graph refers to the Philippine data, and the bottom graph refers to the data for East and Southeast Asia. So as you can see here, the recency note This is the medical wards, this is the surgical wards, and this is the ICU. So, not many prescribers indicate in the charts the reasons for prescribing certain antibiotics. So our rate here is only about 67% in the medical wards and 69.4% among ICU patients. But you will note that among surgical patients in the surgery wards, the writing the reason in note is even lower. So guideline compliance is 70.5% in the medical wards, 52.4% in the surgical ward, and 78% in the ICUs. But if you will look at the staff review date documentation, it is very, very low. So 24% in the medical wards, 38% in surgery, and 18.6% in ICUs. But comparing our data with the Southeast, East and South Asia, it's more or less similar. Okay, so for pneumonias, recency notes that are written for children with pneumonias, for those with community-acquired infections, 70%, and for those with hospital-acquired infections, 88.9%. The staff review date that is documented is also very low, 20% for community-acquired infection and also 20% for hospital-acquired infections. Guideline compliance is 77% for community-acquired infections and 90.7% for hospital-acquired infection. So guideline compliance is compliance to local guidelines, and we also use the NAD guideline here. The quality indicators for pneumonia in adults. So it's also it's 80% for recency notes among those with community-acquired infections, 84.7% among those with hospital-acquired infections, 21.7% for staff review date documentation in community-acquired infections, and 28.7% for hospital-acquired infection. Compliance to guidelines is 84.9% for community-acquired infections and 86.6% for hospital-acquired infections. Okay. So in summary, the 2017 PPS provided us with a tangible and quantifiable quality indicators on antimicrobial prescribing at the hospital level. The overall antimicrobial prevalence rates both in adults and children are high. The overall antimicrobial prevalence rates varies a lot among different hospitals. The most prescribed antibacterials for systemic use among children were cefuroxime, amikacin, and ceftriaxone. In adults, we are cefuroxime, piperacillin, tazobactam, and ceftriaxone also. And nearly half of the children and 40% of adults received therapeutic antimicrobials for hospital-acquired pneumonia and and community-acquired pneumonia. Prolonged surgical prophylaxis for more than 1 day is very common in all hospitals. Cefuroxime is the most commonly used antibiotic for surgical prophylaxis, which is contrary to the National Antibiotic Guideline recommendation. And there is also a high variation of the different kinds of antibiotics that were prescribed for surgical prophylaxis. So we recommend that the data should be used by the AMS teams in their respective hospitals to develop policies and guidelines to improve antimicrobial prescribing, particularly in quality indicators factors such as recency notes, staff review date, and compliance to guidelines. Measures to improve antibiotic prescribing for surgical prophylaxis can be implemented with respect to duration of surgical prophylaxis, the type of antibiotic that is being prescribed, post-prescription antibiotic review, and compliance to local guidelines. This data can also be used for audit and feedback and education to promote behavior change among prescribers in the hospitals. So data can also be used to complement antimicrobial resistance data of the ERSP, and it is highly recommended that repeated PPS should be done to evaluate and monitor the implementation of the antimicrobial stewardship. So before I end, I would like to acknowledge the people behind this project, Dr. Rasaniel, who was the one who introduced the PPS and to us, to the pharmaceutical division of the Department of Health for their support, to the different PPS teams in the 16 different hospitals, and I think they're here, for their invaluable contribution to the data that we have today. To the BAPS working group staff of RITM, of course, to BITSP, BSMIT, and RITM, and also like to acknowledge Global PPS for sharing with us their database and providing us the analysis of our data. So this picture are the main faces of the people behind the point prevalence survey. Thank you very much.